back to Baked HR. I am Jasmine here with my Baked HR co-host, Christina. How are you doing, Christina?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you doing, Jasmine?
I am doing all right. I am excited again about season 2 for Baked HR. We've already had some great guests, and tonight is no different.
I'm so excited that we have Professor with us tonight. I don't even know. You know what? I've never even asked you. Does it bother you that I call you Professor?
Absolutely not. My students call me Stollack. I don't even get the Professor Stollack. So
look at this generation.
We could spend 30 minutes just on that.
No, rude. We're gonna get them. So tell our audience a little about yourself.
I am Professor Matthew Stollack. I am an associate professor at St. Norbert College. It's a small liberal arts college outside of Green Bay, Wisconsin, with about 2,100 very traditional students. So I'm primarily responsible for teaching our HR classes. I teach organizational behavior, occasionally diversity, statistics, HR analytics, compensation. So I'm sort of your utility Swiss Army knife of HR for the college. So I tend to get on a lot of committees as well. So we have a benefits committee on campus. So obviously they asked me to serve on it. I get asked to serve on a lot of hiring committees, search committees. And so I do that. So when people say I don't do HR, a lot of my job really is HR, from performance appraisal to training to benefits, etc.
So I have a quick question before we jump into the actual episode. Being on campus and teaching HR and being involved in all of these committees, what's your relationship like with the college's HR department?
They love me.
So, okay, good.
Yes, so they see me as a font of support that gives them a little more legitimacy when I say they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And actually the most unique thing that sort of gives me a warm heart is that a student I taught 9 years ago is now part of our HR staff.
Oh, that's cool. That feels very full circle.
So it sort of says, if they think that she's good enough to work at the college, I must be doing my job right.
Nice.
I love that. Also, on another side note, Christina, we're gonna find you some benefit boards to get on. Yes.
No, I didn't know that was a thing. Actually, when he said that, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to text him and ask him more about that. That is one committee that I will absolutely say no to. I cannot help you.
All right, Professor. So getting into some of the questions that we wanted to cover tonight. First up, this pandemic has been something that words really cannot explain. But we often, especially in HR and recruiting, we talk a lot about the changes or how has the pandemic changed us as a field. But how do you think the pandemic has changed academia?
So we started March 20, like everyone else. The pandemic hit. The timing was okay. So first, we're just going to talk about what does it mean to teach during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So the timing, if there could be a silver lining in timing, it fell on the Thursday before spring break. Mm-hmm. So we sort of got inklings. Students essentially had 48 hours to move out of the dorms and go home and shift to all remote learning. So imagine you're a senior in college 7 weeks from graduation, and suddenly you're now getting ready to finish up college, and you suddenly can't even be on campus for your last 7 weeks. So
I don't know how I would have handled that. You feel like so many things are attached to that last bit of experience, mm-hmm. and you're prepping to make that transition from school into the workforce. And so it's like, well, now you're going to prep for that transition isolated. So I bet that sucked.
It sucked both for the students and for the professors. So again, it's not commonly known, but most professors aren't trained to be teachers. They're trained to be experts in their particular field. They don't take classes for the most part on how to teach classes. At best, they are teachers' assistants when they are grad students. But for many PhD students, the first encounter they have with a classroom in a leadership position is their first day on the job.
Interesting.
And so, we hope that they do that. So now all of a sudden you had the traditional way, you're in front of a classroom, the students are there. You had to suddenly transition into, with a week preparation, shifting how you teach in front of an audience now to doing it remote. You had to hope that the students at home had proper Wi-Fi or connection. What do you do in that situation if they don't? How do you transition in terms of assignments to be handed in? HR at least is somewhat easy to teach, but imagine being a band teacher or a music teacher and suddenly having to shift. We saw it with a lot of students. You have a daughter living at home, Christina, and suddenly that transition is there. How do you teach statistics online in a synchronous learning? So I punted basically for that last 7 weeks and basically said, all right, how am I going to complete the semester? I'm just going to have and contact a lot of our HR colleagues out in the field. And I was fortunate via Twitter to have a broad network enough that they were willing to take 30, 45 minutes out of their time. And basically, much like the Baked HR, we had conversations about what they were dealing with and tying recruitment and this transition. How are you handling remote work? How are you handling performance appraisal when workers aren't in front of you? How are you rating them and measuring that? How do you measure attendance if that's important to your organization? How do you onboard new employees? How are you recruiting for positions? And so it was fun talking to those colleagues about what they were doing in that very early time period.
So that's kind of neat. It's like your HR students literally got to learn with us because we were learning how to do all of that like on the fly. And so, well, that's really relevant training in the classroom. So that's cool.
Like, as I like to say, from an HR perspective, I know my students aren't going to take 2, 3, 4 of my classes and suddenly be ready to be a HR manager, an HR generalist in the position. At best, I am giving them the body of knowledge, for lack of a better phrase. I'm not going to borrow Sherm's body of knowledge, if you want to call it that. Go ahead. I know your feelings on that.
He said it.
I know, but that's the best I can do in the short time that I have. Seniors, 90%, 85, 90% of the things that you are going to learn is going to be on the job. I can do scenario planning, we can do role playing, but I can't emulate someone coming to you as the HR leader and saying, this coworker harassed me, or my boss is sexually harassing me. I can't put someone in a position to say, hey, here's your first termination. How would you handle it?
Side note, we would gladly come to your class and let your class practice terminating us.
Even in that kind of scenario, it's not the same when there's real stakes that are involved.
Yeah, it is definitely not the same. Yeah.
So my goal is, all right, at least I'm getting them out into the field that they have a basic understanding of tactical and strategic HR, the relative functions and some of the terminology in there, so they're not at a total loss. And what I hope is that. One of the things that I did that got me very involved and was able to connect to you in about 2008, I was very frustrated with the textbooks that I was reading. And it's still frustrating today. Again, you pick up an HR textbook today, you're lucky if there is a chapter on HR technology.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Is there a chapter on HR analytics? And so this suddenly becomes an issue of, all right, I have to be prepared. If these are my students and they're going out, again, this is the unique part of being at a small liberal arts college versus say a University of Alabama or University of Alabama at Birmingham. is where the teachers are much more concerned about their research agenda. Again, we care about research, but we're prepping students for the real world, we hope. And so every student at St. Norbert will at least get 7 weeks of HR. So I have to, at least for all business students, get a 7-week introduction. So it's very surface level, but I hope they're prepared even if they're not going into HR. But that's what I hope to do. So that was the 7 weeks. We got to graduation, and then we had 3 months of summer where instead of doing the usual things that many faculty do to concentrate on research, we suddenly had to prepare for 8 different scenarios that changed every week about how we were going to return to campus in the fall. We had one goal in mind. We were determined from an organizational standpoint to have students back, that they were going to be able to come to campus and learn in front of us. So what does that mean from a technology standpoint? What does it mean from a staffing standpoint? How is facilities involved to make sure the classrooms are ready and being socially distanced? How do we handle the cafeteria to make sure if students are there, how do they eat safely and socially distanced and all that? So it was and I have to give much kudos to the staff of the institution and the leaders in pursuing that goal to make sure we had that education ready to go in August of 2020.
So did you guys return on campus in August?
So we were returned to campus. We had in-campus classes. Now, it wasn't easy. Here's the thing. So I'm sure you're all of it. You don't love speaking in front of an audience, I don't think. I mean, I remember you in Washington, D.C., Christina, speaking in one of those pop-up 5-minute services, I think, right?
Yeah, that's right. You know what? Me and John Nicolasian.
Yep, that's exactly right.
And one time, at one of them, it was me and Mary Faulkner and somebody else.
But that's very hard, right?
Twice. Yeah. It's easier when you have a partner, though, which I assume you don't really have a partner in the classroom.
No, you don't team teach usually. So all of a sudden now you had in-person classes, socially distanced. Teaching is hard enough as it is. You're masked. So we have to teach with a mask. So this is fall semester. Students were masked. So I can't see their faces.
Yeah.
They're covered up. There were students who had to quarantine or isolate. So I'm teaching to an audience. I also had to run simultaneously Zoom with the class on there, and I'm trying to teach to 2 audiences at the same time.
That's tough.
So it was a challenging fall. And then I got COVID. I got diagnosed and I had to do it from home. So that added to it. But the biggest effect of that from being a small college is we focus, and the reason you're coming to a small college is to build those relationships.
Yeah.
With the professor, your classmates. So suddenly you have incoming freshmen who are trying to develop relationships, and many of those connections, much like we onboard our employees and hoping to do that, and I'm sure you've found that challenging as well, is all of a sudden student organizations aren't meeting. Sororities and fraternities and social groups are having odd things. Even on your residential hall floor, you can't suddenly aggregate in a common meeting room. So we were dealing very much with a lot of isolation, harder to make friendships. And so that was part of the struggle. And you're trying to say, I'm dealing with that. I'm dealing with problems at home with COVID or a sick relative. Suddenly my roommate got diagnosed and has to quarantine and isolate. We have a hotel connected to the college right across the street that suddenly became essentially our triage, for lack of a better phrase, thing. And so they had to be isolated, and instead of sending them home 1, 2, 4 hours away from home, they were on campus, but in our hotel basically for 2 weeks while they quarantine and isolate. So that became the challenge from teaching. How do we get them educated when they're suddenly in a room by themselves? As I said, they could Zoom in. What do we do with food delivery? Since they can't go out and leave their room, we were getting meals from the cafeteria delivered in the staff. Is there someone on the college that is on site 24/7? Because you don't know what's going to happen at 2 a.m., much like you have resident hall assistants, your RAs that might have been in that responsible role. Suddenly we have, there's a staffing issue that we had to come up with to handle that situation. So these were sort of the challenges that the college was facing. We made it through the year. We actually had graduation on campus in person outside where everyone was socially distanced. But we're getting ready to start the fall semester tomorrow. And sadly, we still are under a mask mandate. And so given that we're at a level high in the city, masks are required to be worn indoors. So I'm not mentally ready tomorrow to start the new semester wearing another mask, and they're wearing masks. But even that, it's part of the appeal of this is just the general bustle between classes. You're seeing former students. You go downstairs to where our classes, luckily my classes are in my building where my office is, but there'd be no activity. It's sort of like you go down, you get in the class, you teach, you go up, and there's not that connection that you look forward to.
Yeah. So you guys are still struggling, trying to overcome building those connections. So why not just do everything remote?
Students still want as much as possible the campus experience.
Okay.
Part of going to college is developing that independence from your parents, getting to have that college life, meeting classmates, getting to go and see the professor in person. And so we valued that enough that we wanted to try to emulate as much as possible that kind of experience, even though it isn't. So some of I like the word that we are doing education theater. We're putting on sort of a facsimile of a real life situation, even though that they're paying big bucks to go through that experience.
Okay, I'm just gonna be honest. I'm so glad you said that word, because when I read that word, that is not how I pronounce it in my head.
Which word?
Facsimile. That is not how I read it in my head. My college experience was so long ago, I couldn't tell you what I was looking forward to when I went to college campus. But I do like listening to you talk though. Like I remember like sitting outside of the business administration building and just talking to people that also lived in my dorm who were on their way to another class, or like running into a friend who was older than me but went to the same high school as me, so we'd go grab lunch at the quads or whatever. And so yeah, I get, that stinks to miss out on that. But I mean, I think employees to an extent are missing out on that too, which is still kind of puzzling to me, because I feel like there's always been virtual work, right? There's always been remote work. Well, as long as we've
had the technology to do it.
Right. And so there are companies who this was not new for them. And same thing with school, right? That actually, when I went back to college and could do everything virtual, I had a way better experience. Turns out I learn at my pace and I nap in lecture hall. So I just like, somebody has figured out how to overcome this, right? And they're just not telling us because they already had the secret before the pandemic happened. Because like, I still don't know. There's not, you could sell me best practices all day for like the classroom or applying this to employment, but I never want to do something just because you said it worked. I want to do what our people want. So like, I ask you that question and you say your students still want that experience. So then that's what y'all should do. But if your students were saying virtual is great, then so this is where best practices can get us in trouble. But that's just a total sidebar. Sorry, Jasmine, I derailed the conversation again.
But part of it is you were in a class that was designed to be a virtual experience that
Yeah,
was
that's
put in
true.
the time, the resources to make that a meaningful experience. Even a year and
However,
a half in, we're not quite there.
thinking about what you said though about professors not being taught to teach, that totally, like, I can apply that to some of my virtual classes, where maybe not only were they not taught to teach, but they were used to traditional teaching. And so when we added the element of this, virtual option, they definitely weren't taught to do virtual. It's so, to me, now I will do speaking events. It's not, I can't I can't wait to get up tomorrow and speak in front of 300 people. Like, I have to take a shot of vodka before I speak in front of 300 people. But it's so important to me when I do speak to a group of people to make sure that they're all engaged. And so you're saying, like, not seeing their face, which if I was your student would be a good thing, because I can't control my face. But like that, and trying to do that and a virtual audience at the same time, like, I can't even, I feel like I would neglect one.
And
Definitely.
The hard part was, you tended to pay more attention to the audience that is in front of you than the people online. Now, the interesting part that we saw in the spring is, what kind of attendance policy do we want to put in place? Do I require you to have your camera on? Do I require you to have documentation that you are needing to be quarantined? Now, there are and hence need that accommodation. Now, certainly there are myths about teaching that certainly are explored, such as deadlines. We became much more casual and saying, all right, do your best, just get the assignment in, versus in normal times, here's the deadline, get that in or else.
Yeah.
But I understand.
Hard to hold people accountable when we're also trying to figure out all of the changes in our lives, because it wasn't just school, right? But I don't know what's the right amount of accountability, because we need some, but right. There was a period of time where we were like, we're not adding more stress. You just do whatever you need to do.
So what tended to happen both semesters, though, because there was now this availability of joining online, is we had created these classrooms with, for 30 people that to be socially distanced, and created these large classrooms. And suddenly 2 weeks into the semester, it shrunk to 15 or 18 and get smaller and smaller in-person classes. Now, I understood that in February in Green Bay, Wisconsin, when it's 8 degrees out and it's snowing and it's icy and it's 9 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to crawl out of bed, dress up and trudge across, not that we're a large campus, but even a small distance that you might have to walk outside. I could just join online. But we were seeing in April when it was 50, 60 degrees, which means that's shorts weather for Wisconsin. And they were still, you'd have 8 people in class and 20 joining online. So it's sort of, they took advantage of that. And so we as a faculty have sort of said, you're going to need documentation from here on out.
Yeah.
So do you want to get it back to HR, Jasmine? I went on these tangents. I don't want to.
No, it's really good, because I liked how one of the questions was, did you think it allows professors of HR and business the opportunity to show students real-time HR work in this? And it, especially you having, some HR friends, colleagues, business colleagues come in and join, talk about the changes we had to make basically every single day of, well, this is what the CDC said Monday, but on Wednesday it changed. So now we got to do something completely different. It's very important. I think that is exactly what students are needing to see. One of the issues that I've had is, so I've had to teach a class it was a business admin college course. And since I knew HR, the person was like, hey, will you come and teach this HR course? And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And I'm reading the textbook and I'm like, we don't do this. What is this? This isn't a practice that we use, or, yeah, you would do this in a paper-based company, but a lot of companies aren't paper-based. Have we, talked about using computer? Do people know what Microsoft Word is when you wrote this book? What is going on here? So I think it is extremely helpful that we all understand. First of all, we all know that we're all going through this time of life where we're just trying to make it through each and every single day.
Yep. So what I would hope is that if my colleagues at other institutions, I can only speak for my own experience, is when they get their HR textbook or whatever, that's one of the unique things is once we become professors, we get HR textbooks for free. They used to deliver them hard copies and we'd have 8 different published things, but then there became a whole, and this is a whole, we could spend 30 minutes on the textbook selling business. We would have people come to our office to buy our free books. Because there was a black market for selling textbooks.
Okay.
So now these companies have adjusted. I can only get it online. They're only paper, they're not even bound anymore. You have to really go through and say, all right, it's adopted before you really get a hard copy. But getting back to your question, it becomes, am I looking at this information? How am I teaching this information? Can I put it into the proper context of what that, as you said, for example, this particular practice works for a paper company, but might not work for a different kind of company. Are there areas of HR that are not being covered? So even things like active versus passive recruitment.
Listen, I hope you take the entire recruitment chapter out and burn it. Like maybe on one of those 8-degree days, you guys go outside and have a bonfire. Because I've never read a good recruiting chapter in a HR textbook ever.
Oh, again, what is the purpose? Who is this textbook for? So this is an exposure to at least what might be personnel practices of the past, so that you can say, this is the way we used to do it. How are we doing it differently now? So I'm getting much more into, say, recruitment marketing. What does it mean to do Boolean searches and sourcing, which doesn't get covered enough in the textbook? Trying to relate their own experiences. The saddest part, I can talk about it the first week of class, is these are 18, 19-year-olds, and a majority of students have already had a bad experience at work. And they can tell stories about being abused by customers, being harassed by a boss, and the like. So I can then tie that to the context of right now, where we have jobs going unfilled.
Yeah.
And trying to tie, how is HR operating under this environment with, I don't love the term, the great resignation, as they're calling it, because it's still in flux.
You are not our first guest.
Resignation. It is, what did I just say it was?
I don't remember.
They've changed it already. So it's no longer the great resignation. They've changed it already. So.
But that becomes the challenge as well, is, for the past 6 or 7 years, Congress was holding, particularly during the Obama administration, votes literally every month, say, on the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. And so my concern in teaching that is, all right, what am I teaching you? And it could be null and void a week after you graduate or finish the class. So it's sort of like, here's the information of what HR looks like today. We tend to have a conservative student body. So there's probably going to be a number of students that says, oh, they can't fill jobs because of government payouts. And the evidence now is out there. So if I'm teaching HR, I need to demonstrate, hey, states have done this. We have now data that shows it didn't have much of an effect at all on hiring, but in fact, cut a lot of spending to a lot of organizations. That made it harder to hire in the first place. But we're also talking, the thing that often isn't explored, that from an HR perspective, is we've spent 1.5 years on TikTok and all these other things seeing video after video of employees that are quote unquote essential being abused by customers who won't obey the rules.
Yep. Yep.
If I'm an employee looking for a job, why would I want to go work for your company when you are not helping or creating an environment where I feel safe, let alone from COVID, let alone from abusive customer services?
Well, you know, and the flip side of that, though, is their answer to that in many cases is, okay, we're not going to require customers to wear masks anymore because we don't want our frontline staff being the ones to enforce it. But then we get in a situation where, like here, like most of the country is in a very high risk label right now. So like, what the hell?
So you're going to tell me at $10 or $11 an hour, you're not going to help protect me against someone who may be coming in who's asymptomatic or ignoring their symptoms and shopping and doing the things and putting me at risk.
Yeah.
And
they're ignoring them. They're ignoring them hard.
So I mean,
okay. So it sounds like what you're saying is you take these textbooks, kind of like your like little baseline education, like, hey, this is how things were done. Let's apply it to a real world scenario. Or like, hey, here's where you might keep up with these changes in the votes for the ACA because it's nonstop, you know, during that time frame. So that sounds really good. But what about a professor who doesn't have the network that you have of HR people to help with that? And like you're involved in a lot of things. So, okay, so I guess what people who are watching this should know is reach out to your local university and volunteer to come talk to the HR classes and tell them what you're really facing in the real world.
And I hear from HR professionals all the time, they want to get involved with the college and talking to students. Make the phone call, get connected. If you have a university or college in an hour radius, we are more than willing to have you join us via Zoom, join us if we can in person, to have these conversations about the particular topic we're discussing, your area of expertise.
Yeah, don't wait on the college to call you. Go ahead and pick up the phone and call them. I like it.
Yeah. Again, part of the reason that I became very involved with social media in 2008, 2009 was my concern with the state of HR education. That the textbooks weren't providing the information, that being active in SHRM and talking to HR professionals. I was a SHRM chapter president, so I was talking to them in 2006, 2007. I see the kinds of things they were experiencing. And there was a disconnect, as you brought up, Christina, between what you're experiencing in the real life trench HR and what was being taught in, you know, the general theories. Now there is a place for general theories in the body of knowledge that we get, just to get a general sense. What does it mean to recruit somebody? How do we get people to come join our organization? What kinds of inducements do we have to offer? How do we go through the recruitment funnel to get from a pool of 500 to 800 applicants down to what we need to do? You know, what does it mean to say fit? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? These are the conversations I'm trying to have. You laugh. Students are like, I don't know. Cultural fit makes sense. Why isn't that? Well, I want to hire someone who's just like me. So you have to face that battle.
I hope you're using the Jeopardy fit example this year in your course.
Oh, absolutely. It's a wonderful case study on the failure of recruiting and the failure of succession planning. And I mean, I could also talk about the whole Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love situation with the Packers, given that I'm in Green Bay, to talk about succession planning and how organizations prep for that kind of thing and use that example as well. So I try to do that, but my point being is I needed to get out, get that development of connections. Twitter has been very helpful. You know, I came across my first blog where I suddenly started paying attention, Lori Rudiman's Punk Rock HR back at that time. And somehow I started commenting on her blog. And somehow she found me interesting enough to start building that friendship and relationship with her, for example, to get involved.
Yeah.
And so it's been nice because there are things that are going on that if I stayed in my office at St. Norbert College and didn't interact with the real world, I'd be missing, 60% of what HR is really doing on a regular basis.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's super helpful for practicing HR professionals to be connected too, because, I talk to, especially locally in our area, Jasmine would probably agree, like people who have been at the same company for like 20 years, and so they have a really good grasp on how things are done within their organization. But it's hard to bring that creative thinking or these new perspectives if you don't have it. And you can't have it if you've been somewhere for 20 years without talking to other people who do what you do. And so that was really where Twitter came in handy for me to feel like connected and like I could keep learning and find people to look up to in the profession, find people that were examples of what not to do in the profession, like all kinds of things. And it brought all of us together.
All right, so Professor, before we wrap this up, I have one question for you, and I want to get let's see, I had two, but we're gonna have to pick one. So what are the top 3 lessons for a college senior preparing to graduate with a business degree that you would provide?
So if you're going to graduate, it may already be too late. So I'll say that if you aren't approaching it, I'm hoping, and I think our students now are more prepared for getting into the real world than they might have been 5 or 10 years ago, in that they're starting internships every summer.
Good.
Now, obviously 2020 was a disaster for everyone in that. So getting that experience, but finding connections in the field that you're interested to, one, ensure that you're in the right field. Don't spend a summer thinking I'm going to go into marketing, get into a marketing internship, and then suddenly realize, or rather, I would hope that if you do that, you realize, is this right for me or is it not? You're getting that experience that you're not getting in the classroom. Secondly, network. You're either networking or you're not working, so to speak. And so
I like that.
That's an old 2002 saying that I keep using. But
it does feel it does feel like it's from the archives, but I still like it.
But that is, you got to start, whether it be through LinkedIn, through local SHRM chapters, through your chambers of commerce. Green Bay, for example, as a young professionals network. That we are certainly, because we're concerned about brain drain and we want to keep our graduates and young people in the Green Bay area. And so starting out and connecting to that. So try doing that. Build a connection with your alumni network on LinkedIn and saying who's out there. Start reaching out to those graduates who may be in a city that you want to move to, in a region that, or a field that you want to get into, to start saying, all right, what suggestions do you have? I know you all hate pick your brain, but if you approach it appropriately to say, I understand that you're giving of your time. I'm a student at my college. I'm looking for ways to go through that. Go on plant tours or office visits and shadow someone. If you're not able to get an internship in your field, at least try to contact a company that's doing that and talk to your professors, and hopefully they have connections in the area. So again, from that perspective, hopefully not your senior year, if you're going out, that you haven't already done this, it might be a little more difficult, but it's never too late. Once you're graduate, what are the young professional networks that you have in the area? You may be moving to a different city. So what are you doing to learn about contacts in the area? And so whether it be your local SHRM chapter, your local ASTD, World of Work, chambers of commerce, employee resource groups in the area, that's what I would suggest. Do you have ones that I didn't say that I should tell my students?
Well, no, you didn't put me on the spot now, so.
Jasmine didn't have time to prepare her answer.
Not prepared for this. But so we're gonna wrap it up there. We could have a whole conversation because there are a lot of little tidbits out of this. And I'm like, oh wow, we didn't think about it this way. We didn't think about it that way. So we could have a whole nother conversation. But we're gonna wrap it up there so we can get to IG Live on Sundays to talk about Baked HR some more.
You guys have made it sound like a burden. It's not. It's fun for us. No, this was super, super great. We are going to have you back for a follow-up episode because now we're going to call each other and share notes and be like, oh, okay, now we got to dig into this one.
I'm glad to come back whenever you want me.
Awesome.
I'll even send you a cupcake next time instead of you sending me one. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It has been a great pleasure talking to you, catching up, finding out what's been going on since, of course, the pandemic has, again, ruined all things. But until next time, y'all, make sure that you are following us at BakedHR on Instagram. If you have questions or if you have a topic suggestion or if you would like to join us on BakedHR, then send us the email at bakedhr@gmail.com and make sure you like and subscribe to our BakedHR YouTube channel that you're watching right now and hit the notification button so when we drop a new video every Wednesday, you will be notified and tune in. Until next time, we'll see y'all later.
Bye.